Rhea was lost in the desert, her throat dry, her legs weak. She had been walking for what felt like days. Her home planet, where water was rare, had never been this cruel. But now, alone under the hot, bright sun, she felt closer to death with every step. Rhea's people were strong but needed water with special minerals to survive. Without it, her body felt heavy, her skin cracked and dry. Her species, the Talians, could live without food for a while, but not without water, especially not the special mineral-rich water that her body depended on. She was starting to lose hope. The sky above seemed endless, with no sign of clouds, shade, or anything to save her. She had come to this desert after hearing about a hidden spring, but her search had led to nothing but more sand. Her heart sank as she realized she might not make it out. Just as Rhea thought she would collapse for the last time, she saw something strange on the horizon. She squinted her eyes, unsure if it was real or just her mind playing tricks on her. But the shape seemed to move, and as she walked closer, she could make out small buildings and people, humans. Rhea's heart pounded. She had heard about humans before, but she had never met one. Talians and humans rarely crossed paths, but some Talians thought humans were strong, even kind. Others warned that humans were selfish and would never help an alien. Rhea didn't know what to believe, but now she had no choice. She needed water, and the humans were her last hope. Her steps were shaky as she approached the human settlement. She could see a group of them sitting together, talking and laughing. One of the humans, a young man with dark hair and bright eyes, noticed her. He looked surprised but didn't seem afraid. Instead, he got up and walked toward her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. Rhea tried to answer, but her voice was gone, lost to the dry air. She felt her knees weaken, and before she knew it, she was falling. The young man quickly stepped forward and caught her, his arms strong and steady. "You look like you need water," he said, his voice soft. He reached into a bag and pulled out a water bottle, holding it to her lips. Rhea hesitated. She had never accepted help from a human before, and she wasn't sure she could trust him. But her need for water was stronger than her fear. She opened her mouth and drank. The water was cool, refreshing, and she could feel life returning to her tired body with each sip. It wasn't the special mineral water she needed, but it was enough for now. She looked up at the young man, wanting to thank him, but her voice was still weak. She managed a small nod, hoping he understood. The man smiled and sat down beside her, letting her rest. "My name's Alex," he said, introducing himself. "Are you from around here?" Rhea shook her head. She tried to explain, but all she could manage were a few broken words. Water. Special. Needed. Alex looked at her with a frown, trying to understand. After a moment, his face lit up as if he had figured it out. "You need special water?" he asked, and Rhea nodded. She was relieved that he understood, even if only a little. Alex thought for a moment, scratching his head. "There's a spring not far from here," he said. "It has minerals in it. Maybe it's what you're looking for." He looked at her, his eyes filled with determination. "I'll take you there. It's dangerous, but you need it, right?" Rhea's eyes widened. This human was willing to help her, even though he didn't know her. He didn't have to do this. He could have left her in the desert to fend for herself. But instead, he was offering to guide her to the spring, risking his own safety. She nodded, feeling a strange warmth inside. Maybe humans weren't all selfish like some Talians believed. Maybe some of them were kind like Alex. She took another sip of water, feeling a bit stronger now. "Thank you," she managed to whisper, her voice still shaky. Alex just smiled and patted her shoulder. "Don't mention it. Let's get you to that spring." As they set off together, Rhea felt hope returning. She didn't know if the spring would have the water she needed, but she trusted Alex, and in that vast, lonely desert, she finally didn't feel alone. A human's unexpected kindness. Rhea and Alex walked side by side through the desert. With each step, Rhea could feel her strength slowly returning. The small sips of water from Alex's bottle helped, but she knew it wouldn't be enough to keep her alive for long. She needed the special mineral water that only the hidden spring could provide. Still, Rhea felt a strange comfort having someone with her, especially someone as kind as Alex. As they walked, Alex noticed how tired she looked. Every few minutes, he would stop and let her rest. He didn't complain or hurry her along. Instead, he watched over her carefully, making sure she was okay. "Do you feel any better?" Alex asked, looking at her with a warm smile. Rhea nodded, managing a small smile of her own. She was still weak, but the kindness in his eyes made her feel a little stronger. She had always been told that humans were different from her people, that they were tough and didn't care about others. But Alex was proving all those ideas wrong. He was helping her when he didn't have to. As they walked, Rhea noticed that Alex kept looking at her with curiosity. She wondered what he thought of her strange skin and tall, slender form. Most humans had never seen an alien like her before, but instead of fear, Alex seemed interested. "What's your name?" he asked after a while. "Rhea," she managed to say. Her voice was still weak, but she felt safe enough to speak with him. "Rhea," he repeated, smiling. "It's a nice name." Rhea felt a warm feeling in her chest. She wasn't used to humans complimenting her, especially when she looked so weak and tired. She nodded, not sure what to say, but Alex's kindness continued to surprise her. After a few more minutes, Alex stopped and handed her the water bottle again. "Take another sip. You need your strength." Rhea took the bottle gratefully and drank. She could feel the cool water going down her throat, refreshing her body. She knew it wasn't the special water she needed, but it was enough to keep her going. When she handed the bottle back, she noticed it was almost empty. "Are you sure you don't need it?" she asked, worried that he might need water just as much as she did. Alex shook his head and smiled. "Don't worry about me. I can get more water back at camp. Right now, you're the one who needs it." Rhea couldn't believe what she was hearing. Alex was giving up his own water to help her, even though they barely knew each other. She wondered why he was being so kind. Back on her planet, people didn't often share, especially not with strangers. But here was Alex, a human, doing exactly that. "Why? Why are you helping me?" Rhea finally asked, curious and confused. Alex shrugged, his eyes warm and gentle. "I don't know. I saw someone who needed help, and it felt like the right thing to do." He paused, looking at her. "Besides, we're not so different. You're just someone trying to survive, just like me." His words made Rhea's heart feel lighter. She had never thought about it that way. Maybe, despite all their differences, they really weren't so different. They both wanted to live, to find water, to survive. In that moment, Rhea felt a connection to him, one that went beyond words. As they continued walking, the heat of the desert grew stronger, and Rhea started to feel weak again. Alex noticed and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We'll get there soon," he promised. "Just a little farther." Rhea nodded, feeling grateful for his support. She didn't know how much farther she could go, but Alex's presence gave her the strength to keep moving. She took deep breaths, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a small hill. Alex pointed ahead. "The spring is just on the other side of this hill," he said, smiling. "We're almost there." Rhea's heart leaped with hope. She had come so far, and now the water she needed was within reach. She looked at Alex, her eyes shining with gratitude. Without him, she would have never made it this far. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Alex just smiled and nodded. "You're welcome, Rhea. Let's get you that water." Together, they climbed the hill, their steps slow but steady. For the first time in days, Rhea felt truly hopeful. She didn't know what she would find at the spring, but with Alex by her side, she felt ready for whatever came next. A surprising offer. The sun was sinking lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the desert as Rhea and Alex rested by the small spring they had finally reached. Rhea drank deeply from the mineral-rich water, feeling her strength slowly returning. She had traveled so far and fought so hard to find this water, and without Alex, she knew she would have never made it. As Rhea looked around, she saw that Alex was watching her closely. He had stayed by her side the whole time, helping her through the worst of her struggle. She was surprised by his kindness, but there was something more in his gaze now, something serious, as if he were thinking deeply. "Is this enough for you?" Alex asked after a moment, his eyes full of concern. "Will this water keep you strong?" Rhea paused, thinking. She felt much better, but she knew that her journey couldn't end here. The water in this spring was only enough for a few days' survival. She needed a stable, lasting source of mineral water if she wanted to keep living on this dry planet. But that kind of water was rare and far from this place. "This water helps," she said softly, looking down at the ground. "But it's not enough to keep me alive for long." Alex nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He thought for a moment, his face serious. Then he looked back at her. "Rhea, if there's another place with the water you need, I'll take you there." Rhea's eyes widened in surprise. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Alex had already helped her so much, risking his own safety to guide her to this spring. And now he was offering to take her even farther. "But why?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. "You don't even know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you help me like this?" Alex shrugged, a small smile on his face. I just don't want to see someone suffer if I can do something about it. Besides, I kind of like having a new friend from another world." Rhea felt a warmth in her chest at his words. She had never thought a human would see her as a friend. Her own people often treated outsiders with caution, yet Alex was treating her with kindness she had rarely experienced, even from her own kind. "Thank you, Alex," she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. I don't know what to say." "Just say you're ready for an adventure," Alex replied with a grin. "Because if we're going to find a long-lasting water source for you, it's not going to be easy." Rhea nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She didn't know where this journey would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. With Alex by her side, maybe she had a chance. After a short rest, Alex stood up and checked his supplies. "We're going to need food, water, and a place to camp along the way," he said thoughtfully. "There's a hidden valley not too far from here. It's full of plants, and I've heard rumors that it has more springs. If we're lucky, one of them might have the minerals you need." "A valley with plants?" Rhea asked, her curiosity piqued. "I've never seen that on this planet. How do you know about it?" Alex chuckled. "I've been wandering around this desert for a while. You pick up on things." He looked at her with a twinkle in his eye. "Besides, what's life without a little exploration?" Rhea smiled, feeling her spirits lift. The thought of a valley full of plants and springs sounded like paradise to her. And with Alex leading the way, she felt safe. They set off as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The desert was still hot, but the air was cooling down, making it easier to walk. Rhea followed Alex closely, trusting him completely. She didn't know what dangers lay ahead, but she knew Alex would protect her. As they walked, they shared more stories about their lives. Rhea told Alex about her people and their customs, and Alex shared stories of his travels and adventures in the desert. She learned that Alex was a traveler at heart, always curious about new places and people. He had spent most of his life exploring, seeking new sights and experiences. Before long, Rhea realized they had become true friends. Alex was no longer just a stranger helping her out of kindness. He was someone she could rely on, someone who cared about her survival as much as she did. When they finally stopped to camp under the stars, Raya looked up at the night sky, feeling the sense of peace. The journey ahead was uncertain, and she knew it would be dangerous, but she also knew she wouldn't be facing it alone. For the first time in her life, she felt she had someone she could trust completely. As they lay down to rest, Alex gave her a reassuring smile. "We'll find that valley, Rhea. We'll find the water you need." Rhea nodded, her heart full of hope. With Alex by her side, she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Into the wild desert. The next morning, Rhea and Alex set out before sunrise, hoping to avoid the midday heat. The desert stretched endlessly in front of them, with the valley of springs and plants still far off. The air was cool and calm, but Rhea knew that soon the scorching sun would make their journey even harder. Alex led the way, his eyes sharp and focused. He walked confidently, as though he knew every inch of this desert. Rhea followed him closely, amazed by his knowledge and steady pace. For him, the desert seemed like an open book, and he could read it with ease. As they walked, Alex pointed out different plants and rocks. "See this cactus," he said, stopping and tapping on a small, spiky plant. "You can drink water from it in emergencies. Just cut it open like this." He pulled out a small knife and sliced the cactus, showing her the moisture inside. Rhea watched closely, fascinated. Her planet didn't have such plants, and she was grateful for every piece of information Alex shared. She was starting to understand why he loved exploring so much. Every step seemed to bring something new. They continued on, the sun rising higher and hotter. By midday, the sand felt almost like fire under their feet, and they had to rest in the shade of a large boulder. Rhea was exhausted, and she could see Alex was tired too. But he tried to hide it. "How much farther is the valley?" Rhea asked, her voice weak from the heat. "We're getting close," Alex said with a reassuring smile. "If we keep this pace, we should reach it by tomorrow." "Hang in there, Rhea. You're doing great." Rhea nodded, feeling encouraged by his words. She felt weak, but she pushed herself to keep going. She didn't want to let Alex down. He was her only hope, and she was determined to make it through. As the sun began to set, they started walking again, the desert air cooling around them. Rhea felt a little better as the temperature dropped, but she knew they had to keep moving. The valley was still a day away, and she didn't have much energy left. Suddenly, they heard a strange sound, a faint growling noise coming from behind a dune. Alex stopped, his body tense, as he listened carefully. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his eyes narrowing. Rhea's heart raced as she moved closer to Alex, her fear growing. She had never heard a sound like this before, but she trusted Alex to protect her. She could see his hand on the knife he carried, ready to defend them if necessary. From behind the dune, a creature appeared. It was large, with sharp teeth and a thick, scaly body. Its eyes glinted in the fading light, and it looked hungry. Rhea felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard stories of wild creatures in the desert, but she had never seen one up close. Alex stepped forward, keeping himself between Rhea and the creature. "Stay calm, Rhea," he said softly. "These creatures can sense fear. Just back away slowly." Rhea followed his instructions, moving slowly backward. She watched as Alex held his ground, his eyes locked on the creature. It growled, baring its teeth, but Alex didn't flinch. Instead, he made a low, steady sound, as if trying to calm the creature. To Rhea's surprise, the creature paused, its growling stopping as it tilted its head. Alex continued to make the calming sound, and after a few moments, the creature backed away, disappearing into the dunes. Rhea let out a sigh of relief, her heart pounding. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, turning to her. "Yes," Rhea said, her voice shaking slightly. "How did you do that?" Alex shrugged, smiling. "You just have to know how to talk to them. Most desert creatures are just looking for food or water. If they see you as a threat, they'll attack. But if you stay calm, they'll leave you alone." Raya was amazed by his skill and bravery. She realized that Alex had a deep respect for the desert and its creatures, and that respect had saved them both. She felt lucky to have him as her guide, and her admiration for him grew even stronger. As night fell, they set up a small camp, with Alex building a fire to keep them warm. They sat together under the stars, the vast desert stretching around them. Raya looked up at the sky, feeling a mix of wonder and exhaustion. She was tired, but the beauty of the desert night made her feel at peace. Alex handed her a small piece of food, and she took it gratefully. "Thank you, Alex, for everything," she said, her voice full of gratitude. Alex smiled, his face lit by the firelight. "We're in this together, Raya. I won't let anything happen to you." They ate in silence, both lost in their thoughts. Raya felt a deep bond forming between them, one that went beyond mere survival. She knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she could count on Alex. The monster at the spring. The first light of dawn spread over the desert, casting soft, golden shadows across the sand. Raya and Alex were already on the move, eager to reach the hidden valley and its springs before the sun rose high. They had walked for hours in silence, focused on their goal, feeling the cool morning breeze on their faces. As they climbed a rocky hill, Alex paused and squinted into the distance. A dark green patch peeked from the middle of the desert, surrounded by red and golden sand. It was the valley, and they were closer than they thought. "There it is, Raya," Alex said, his voice full of relief. "The Valley of Springs. We're almost there." Raya's eyes brightened. She could hardly believe it. After days of struggling through the harsh desert, they were so close to the life-saving water she needed. Her energy returned as she followed Alex down the hill, her heart pounding with excitement. They moved carefully, making their way through thick brush and prickly plants as they entered the valley. The air here felt cooler, filled with the soft sound of trickling water. Raya's senses came alive. She could almost taste the fresh water. She looked at Alex, smiling gratefully, and he smiled back, happy to have guided her this far. But then Alex's expression changed. He looked around, his smile fading, and raised his hand, signaling for Raya to stop. "What's wrong?" Raya whispered, her voice barely audible. Alex pointed ahead. "Look there," he said, his voice low. Raya squinted and saw a small spring nestled between two large rocks, but something else was there too. A huge, shadowy figure crouched by the water. The creature was massive, with thick, scaly skin and long, sharp claws. Its head was low, drinking from the spring, and its body looked tense, as if it was ready to attack at any moment. Raya's excitement turned to fear. She had never seen anything like this creature before. It looked like a mix between a lizard and a wild beast, with razor-sharp teeth and bright, glowing eyes. She could feel her pulse quicken as she watched it move, its claws digging into the ground as it drank. "That's a desert monster," Alex whispered, his face serious. "They're rare, but dangerous. It must be drawn to the water, just like us." Raya's heart sank. The water she needed was right there, but with that creature guarding it, there was no way she could get close. She looked at Alex, unsure of what to do. "Do we wait for it to leave?" she asked, hoping there was an easy solution. Alex shook his head. "These creatures are territorial. It might stay here for hours, even days, and we don't have that long." He looked around, thinking quickly. "But if I can distract it, maybe you can get to the spring." Raya's eyes widened. "You'd risk yourself for me again." Alex nodded, his face determined. "I promised I'd get you to the water. And I don't break my promises." Raya felt a mix of fear and gratitude. She knew Alex was brave, but this was a dangerous plan. The creature was enormous and could easily hurt him. But there was no other choice. She needed that water, and she trusted Alex completely. Alex pulled a small rock from the ground and handed it to Raya. "When I distract it, run to the spring and get as much water as you can. Fill this, and don't stop until you have enough." Raya took the rock, nodding, her hands shaking. "Be careful, Alex." With a deep breath, Alex moved closer to the creature, staying hidden behind the rocks. He picked up another stone and threw it as far as he could. The stone hit the ground with a loud crack, echoing across the valley. The creature's head shot up, its glowing eyes scanning the area. It let out a low, menacing growl, then slowly moved toward the sound. Alex threw another rock, this time in the opposite direction, making sure the creature was fully distracted. "Now, Raya," Alex whispered urgently. Raya didn't hesitate. She sprinted to the spring, her heart pounding, and quickly knelt by the water. She filled the rock Alex had given her, scooping up the precious water as fast as she could. She could feel her hands shaking, but she focused, knowing that this water meant survival. Just as she filled the rock, a loud roar echoed through the valley. Raya looked up and saw the creature, furious, turning back toward her. It had realized it was tricked, and its eyes were locked on her now. "Run, Raya," Alex shouted, rushing toward her. Raya scrambled to her feet, clutching the water. She sprinted toward Alex, her legs moving as fast as she could manage. She felt the creature's heavy footsteps shaking the ground behind her, each step closer and closer. Just when it seemed the creature would catch her, Alex stepped in front of her, holding his knife out. "Go, Raya," he shouted, his eyes fierce. Raya didn't stop to argue. She dashed past him, running as far as she could. She looked back to see Alex standing his ground, the creature staring him down. It growled, but Alex didn't move, his eyes sharp and steady. Then, the creature slowly backed down, perhaps sensing Alex's determination. It turned and slinked back to the spring, giving up the chase. Raya gasped, relieved and exhausted. She waited until Alex joined her, his breathing heavy but his face calm. "Thank you, Alex," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You saved my life." Alex smiled, wiping the sweat from his brow. "And you got the water, didn't you? That's what matters." As they walked away from the valley, Raya felt a deep sense of gratitude. Alex had risked everything to help her, and she knew she would never forget his bravery. Together, they had faced the monster and won. Life-giving water. The desert was quiet now, with only the soft sound of wind blowing across the sand. Raya and Alex walked slowly, both of them exhausted from the long journey, but there was a sense of relief in the air. Raya clutched the stone container filled with the precious water that Alex had helped her get, and she knew that with it, her life had been saved. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The heat of the day was fading, but Raya still felt drained. The water felt heavy in her hands, but she couldn't wait any longer to drink it. She had made it through the hardest part of their journey, and now the water was within reach. They found a small shaded area near a large rock. Alex helped her sit down, his face tired but kind. He had done so much for her already, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude toward him. He had protected her from the desert's dangers, and now he was helping her survive in it. "Do you think it will be enough?" Raya asked quietly, looking at the small stone container. She had filled it as much as she could, but the water was still not enough to last for too long. They needed to find more, but for now, it would have to do. Alex nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "It's enough for today. After we rest, we can head back to the valley tomorrow and see if we can find more." Raya didn't want to think about tomorrow yet. She was too thirsty, too weak, to focus on anything else. She lifted the stone container to her lips and tilted it carefully. The water was cool and fresh, and it felt like life itself was flowing back into her. As the water touched her lips, Raya's mind almost went blank. She drank and drank, feeling the cold liquid slip down her throat, replenishing her body, filling her up like a desert after rain. She closed her eyes, letting out a long sigh of relief. It was everything she needed. The water was like a miracle, like a promise of survival. Alex watched her, a small smile on his face. He didn't say anything, just letting her enjoy the water. He knew how important it was for her. After a few moments, Raya lowered the container, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but full of meaning. "I couldn't have done it without you." Alex nodded, his eyes gentle. "You would have found a way, Raya. You're stronger than you think." Raya smiled at him, grateful for his words. It had been hard, so hard, but now, with the water in her body, she could think more clearly. She wasn't out of danger yet, but she had hope again, and hope was a powerful thing. As she sat there, resting against the cool rock, Raya looked at Alex. He was gazing into the distance, his face serious, but there was something different in his eyes now. There was a kind of peace there, something Raya had noticed in him more and more as the days passed. "Alex," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Why are you doing all of this? You barely know me. You don't owe me anything." Alex looked at her, his gaze meeting hers. He seemed to consider her question carefully before answering. "I owe you nothing," he said slowly. "But I've learned that in life, sometimes you do things for others not because of what you owe them, but because it's the right thing to do." He paused, looking down at the ground for a moment before looking back up at her. "And Rhea, I've seen something in you. You're not just an alien or a stranger. You're someone worth helping." Raya felt a warmth in her chest. His words meant more to her than anything else. She had never felt so seen, so valued. She was just a lost alien girl in a strange world, but Alex treated her like she mattered. She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Alex." Alex smiled at her, wiping the tear away gently. "We're in this together, Raya. That's all that matters." They sat in silence for a while, the desert around them calming as the night came on. The stars above twinkled brightly, a reminder of how far they had come. They were still far from their destination, and the dangers of the desert hadn't disappeared. But now they had water, and each other. After a while, Alex stood up, stretching his tired limbs. "We should rest here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll go back to the valley for more water, and then keep moving." Rhea nodded. She knew they couldn't stay in one place for long. The desert was a harsh place, and they had to keep moving forward. But right now, she didn't mind. She was content, for the first time in days, to just sit here with Alex and feel the warmth of the fire they built between them. As she lay down to sleep, her body full of water and her mind full of thoughts of the future, Raya couldn't help but feel a little less alone. She had survived the desert, not just because of the water, but because of Alex's kindness. It was something she would never forget. A promise remembered. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a soft glow across the desert. Raya slowly opened her eyes, her body still tired from the journey, but the water had given her new strength. She could feel the warmth of the sun already starting to touch her skin, a reminder that the day ahead would be just as harsh as the one before. But today was different. She was no longer alone. Alex was by her side, and they had made it this far together. Raya sat up slowly, feeling the cool morning air fill her lungs. She looked at Alex, who was already awake, staring into the distance. He was always alert, always thinking about their next move. But today, his expression was calm. He seemed at peace, like the long journey had brought him closer to something important. "Good morning," Raya said quietly, her voice still a little weak, but filled with gratitude. Alex turned to her and smiled, a real smile, the kind that made his eyes twinkle. "Morning. How are you feeling?" Raya stretched, still feeling the weight of the desert in her body, but the water had made a huge difference. "Much better. Thank you for everything." Alex just nodded, his gaze softening. "No need to thank me. We're a team, remember?" Rhea nodded. She remembered. And she had learned something important over the past few days. Alex wasn't just helping her out of kindness. He saw her as more than just an alien. He saw her as someone worth fighting for, someone worth saving. That was something she had never expected to find in a human. After they had packed up their small camp, they began walking again, making their way through the vast desert. The land stretched endlessly before them, but now it didn't feel as empty. Raya had come to understand the desert, its dangers, and its beauty. But more importantly, she had come to understand Alex. He wasn't just her savior. He was someone she trusted, someone she would never forget. The sun climbed higher, and the heat became unbearable. Raya felt the sweat on her brow, and her mouth went dry. She knew they had to reach the next oasis soon, or they would be in trouble again. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Not with Alex by her side. They walked in silence for a while, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Then, after what felt like hours, Alex stopped. He turned to Rhea, his face serious. "Raya," he said quietly, "I've been thinking." Raya looked at him, worried. "About what?" Alex took a deep breath. "About how we're going to make it out of here. I promised you I'd get you to safety. I don't break promises." Raya felt her heart skip a beat. She knew Alex had kept his word so far, but the desert was still a dangerous place. They had made it this far, but the hardest part was yet to come. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice low. Alex looked at her with a mix of determination and kindness. "I'm not sure how much further we can go on our own. We need to find help. I know you're from another world, and that means there might be others who can help us. Maybe a ship, maybe another group of aliens." Raya's heart raced. She had thought about it before, but the fear of never finding her people had kept her from hoping. She had thought she was alone, that she had been left behind. But Alex was offering her something different, a chance to find others, a chance to find her place again. "You really think we can find them?" she asked, her voice full of hope. "I do," Alex said confidently. "We'll keep looking. I won't leave you until we do." Rhea smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. She had always feared being abandoned, left alone in this strange world. But Alex's words filled her with hope. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was someone who truly cared about her, someone who had proven that actions spoke louder than words. "You're keeping your promise," she said softly, feeling a lump form in her throat. Alex gave her a small smile. "Of course I am. I told you I would." They continued their journey through the desert, but now there was a new sense of purpose in their steps. Raya didn't know if they would find her people, but with Alex by her side, she felt like anything was possible. As the day wore on, they finally reached the edge of the desert. The sand gave way to rocky terrain, and in the distance, Raya could see what looked like a small outpost. It was nothing like the advanced cities she had once known, but it was a sign that there might be life out here after all. Alex glanced at Raya, his eyes full of promise. "We'll figure this out, together." Rhea nodded, feeling a surge of warmth in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. Alex had kept his promise, and now, together, they had a chance to find her way home. The sun was setting behind them, casting a beautiful glow across the rocky landscape. Raya looked up at the sky, the stars beginning to twinkle. It was a moment of peace, a moment she would remember forever. She had found more than just water in this desert. She had found a true friend, someone who would never break their promise. And for the first time in a long time, Raya believed that maybe, just maybe, she could make it home.